Thank you to the organizers for letting me speak here today. I'm going to present a project with two studies, which were included in my Ph.D. dissertation in 2015. In these two studies, we have looked into the effect of augmentative and alternative communication, AAC, using tactile symbols and schedules. The children and young people who comprise the sample included in this project all have, with one exception, further difficulties in addition to the blindness. The studies were conducted by the Department of Visual Impairment, Statped in Norway, in collaboration with the University of Oslo and the National Autism Unit at Oslo University Hospital. Co-author and supervisor on PhD study was Terje Nærland, he has a PhD, and my head supervisor was Professor Harald Martinsen from the University of Oslo. As you know, children with congenital blindness comprise a heterogeneous group of individuals with differences in general cognitive level, activity, mobility skills, communication, and social and linguistic skills, among other things. The children are to a great degree dependent on their caregivers to organize the environment and structure the interaction to promote meaningful activity. AAC, using tactile symbols and schedules in different contexts and with different goals for the activity, can help to promote the child or youth's activity. So the aim of the project was to describe and evaluate the use of tactile schedules among 7 children and adolescents who are blind. The first study was called Enhancing Activity by Means of Tactile Symbols. Well, in the first study, the effect the use of tactile symbols has on 6 children and adolescents with congenital blindness and ASD, autism spectrum difficulties, was examined. The study 2, we named Observing the Use of Tactile Schedules. In this study, we describe how they use tactile schedules, the 7 children who participated, and we evaluated how they used it. The participants in the first study were between 5 to 17 years, and one other person came to this sample, which was 3 years old in the second study. 6 were blind without light perception, and 1 was blind with light perception. So it was category 5 or 4. And 3 had severe ID, intellectual disability, 2 mild or moderate, 1 mild, and 1 had no additional disabilities without the blindness. And the language development of these children, many had many words and sentences in free distribution, and 2 had some speech with the use of single words and whole phrases and formulas, and 1 had a few words and signs. And our data consists of transcriptions of observation of language use and naturally occurring behavior. And we have reported qualitative and quantitative data from the project. The first study, the aim was to describe conditions of when children with blindness have knowledge of what to do in specific situations. This knowledge leads to performance or starting activities. And the study investigates responses to verbal versus tactile requests. Our hypotheses for this study were as follows. The use of tactile symbols increases the likelihood that children with blindness, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorders follow requests. 2, the use of tactile symbols leads to more independent activity among these children. It stimulates them to initiate additional actions. The tactile symbols consisted of 2 different modes of information giving. It was 3-dimensional symbols. I'm going to show you just 3-dimensional symbols, which consisted of parts of object or arbitrary material affixed to a 7x7 thin plywood board or paper board. Or they were in braille and they were less tall. The height was 3 centimeters. And the length differed according to the length of the word, which was said as a symbol here. I'm going to send around some examples so that you can see them. The symbols were individually made for each individual with a variety of textures and different kind of iconity. So you can just send it while I talk. Thank you. Whoops. And the schedules consisted of a long plank or with a line of Velcro fixed in the middle of it. It's going around. I'm going to skip this so to get more time for the rest. This is a picture with an example of tactile symbols, and I also sent some around so you can touch them. This one is of sorting, where we have put small items affixed to this plywood board. It's a key and a button and a sort of a nail fixed to one. And balancing is the other symbol, which has a texture of the balance board in the gym. This is a picture of an example of a tactile daily schedule. It's a plank, and the pupil who is using it has just taken off the activity is finished with, and he puts the symbol in the finished box. The next thing he's going to do is leisure time, so he's going to pick what he's going to do in his break or leisure time, with 6 symbols to choose between. Here's an example of a tactile symbol in Braille, and an example of a tactile daily schedule in Braille. The procedure from the project were that we had at baseline, we had video recordings and school reports and from observations of how the pupils acted and performed in situations without tactile symbols present. We examined these reports and observations. And then we had an intervention period between the first time 1 to time 2, based on using tactile symbols in various pedagogical settings. We planned it individually for each child. The intervention period and use of schedules with tactile symbols lasted for a minimum of 1.5 years. Then, at T2, the pupils were video recorded in various selected pedagogical naturalistic settings. The tactile symbols, they were introduced to the pupils then in naturalistic settings, either as single symbols representing a narrowly defined activity, for example, a song to sing, a pretzel to eat, or as an activity divided into separate tasks, consisting of 2 or 3 symbols, representing separate tasks in a structured activity, like the music lesson you saw. The teacher would name the symbol when the pupil touched it, and the activity would start immediately. All pupils use tactile symbols daily in school settings from when the intervention started. And the symbols were either placed in front of the pupil as single symbols or on schedules, located at a certain place, which the pupil was aware of. All pupils had received training in touching, reading the symbols on these schedules from left to right. This was to give access and possibilities to gain information about order and succession of events. They had been taught to administer their use of schedules by putting, for example, the finished symbol in a finished box, and then touch the first on the schedule. And the pupils were not taught to read the schedules in other ways. I mixed schedules and schedules. That's because the American and the English expression. And I'm a Norwegian, so I kind of take both. At T1, the results from the first study. The pupils followed seldom or never verbal requests from their caregivers at the time of observation. At T2, all pupils perceived the tactile symbols to be explicit requests to perform the act referred to by the symbols. Thus, the results show that all the children followed requests to act more often when tactile symbols were used than when they were only verbally encouraged to take action. The pupils also showed interest by touching the tactile symbols when they were available, in almost all instances except of one. And the children with some or relatively good verbal skills, they added independent actions in addition to follow the particular tactile requests. Independent actions were shown through the use of advanced reading strategies or changing a tactile choice. The second study, the aim was to give detailed descriptions of the behavior of 7 pupils who participated when using tactile schedules. Our aim is to show behaviors that may be indicative of attainment of some of the goals that are usual to have for the use of such schedules. Some conditions, like the interest in and understanding of tactile symbols, are necessary for the attainment of the more typical goals related to the use of tactile schedules, like predictability and enhancing communication. We have in our study differentiated this by using the terms basic conditions and particular functions. For such schedules to be effective, some basic conditions have to be met. Only then can the schedules be used both for receptive and expressive communication for a variety of functions. An obvious basic condition for the use of such schedules is to understand tactile symbols. Showing attentiveness towards tactile schedules and reading and administering the schedules independently, generalization of use, may also be regarded as basic conditions for the use of such schedules. When it comes to particular functions or goals, the schedules may be a tool to provide structure and thus increase predictability to each day and to activities. Tactile schedules may also promote functional activity, where the individual are given opportunities to display interest and to exercise a preference, and thus achieve a sense of agency. And they may be a tool for communication as communicative support. In addition, attention is focused on observing how the use of such schedules might influence the interaction between pupils and teachers. The results were that we saw that all the children, they showed interest in the schedules. And all the children used tactile schedules actively. They used several strategies when reading these schedules, both reading strategies they had been taught and their own strategies. And the reading strategies we saw was read left to right, which they were taught, where the pupil touched or read the whole or part of the schedule from left to right. Or read symbols simultaneously. The pupils used both one or both hands, or spread fingers on one or two hands to read or be in touch with more than one symbol at the same time. Read right to left. The pupil read the whole or part of the schedule from right to left. Sometimes they started to read on the middle, and they spread their fingers from the middle as well. It was possible to find examples of child behavior indicating achievement of a generalized use of tactile schedules, predictability, agency, and communication. And these goals are more or less observable. So we had variables describing when we thought it was agency or predictability. I'm going to read one example, which is an example where the behavior indicating basic functions in progress, use of taught and untaught reading strategies. The pupil, he is standing alone in front of his daily schedule, which is placed on the wall. He independently and quickly touches his tactile schedule while using both hands on one or two symbols simultaneously. He touches 8 different symbols this way, touching some several times, using strategy read left to right, read right to left, and read symbols simultaneously. His teacher stands behind him, following the pupil's exploration of the symbols on the schedule for 10 seconds. And that's quite long when you saw the speed the boy in the video clip had. And then she says yes, followed by physically leading his left underarm lightly in the direction of the first symbol on the schedule. And the activity started. In addition to reading the schedule, using the learn strategy, this pupil used his own strategies when reading. The teacher both allowed the pupil to show initiative and adjusted to his requirements by letting him explore the symbols in his own way, while keeping quiet and still herself. It's easy to help too fast and too much. The teacher's assessment in this example also included keeping track of the timing of when to intervene after 10 seconds and helping the pupil to follow and continue with the strategy learned, read left, right, that is. So the conclusions. No, the next example. The teacher has placed all symbols for the relevant lesson on the desk outside the empty plank with Velcro. And the pupil's task is to place the tactile symbols in the succession he prefers on the plank, the schedule. After the pupil has done this, his teacher asks, "What shall we have last? Is it Braille?" the pupil says. "Yes, yes, then all is ready." He mumbles and removes the two last symbols from the schedule and changes their places in the row. Data becomes the last symbol and Braille the second last. "Do you want to have data last?" "Yes, yes," he says. The teacher's way of structuring this activity gave the pupil opportunity to influence the sequence of event. When the teacher asked her first question, she gave the pupil the opportunity to confirm his choice, which she too confirmed after the pupil's answer. But when he changed the selected order of events, and the teacher asked him about his new choice, thus acting upon it as intentional, the pupil positively confirmed this. So, what we saw. The schedule seemed to be a useful tool for children with blindness, with or without ASD and ID, which the pupils could get knowledge of the day or of different situations. When child behavior indicating interest and generalized use of tactile schedules is shown, this may mean that the child is open to learning at that time and may thus increase the probability that the child's use of symbols and schedules has achieved a tool function for the child. The availability and use of tactile schedules may contribute by increasing the opportunities for learning situations to arise for both pupils and teachers. Thus, the use of tactile schedules in both interactional and educational situations may influence different aspects of educational goals for individuals who are blind. And the last. Since these schedules seem to be a tool with which the pupils could get knowledge of the day or of different situations, it also includes more possibility for the teachers to expand the learning situations, opportunities for the pupils, the planned goals, compared to the others which is not planned but just happening. This is valuable in light of these pupils' difficulties in enabling predictability of situations, either because of the difficulties within the autism spectrum and or lack of sight, and thus their dependence on other persons to achieve this. Yeah.
We have time for a few questions.
Good.
No?
Thank you for your presentation. I think it was interesting to see also the interaction between, in the first case, with the child and the less experienced teacher, because it's very often like that the child know what to do, but the teacher is unsure about it, and also that they let the children to be impatient. I think very often you ask the children to continue look at the picture, even if they find that they are ready. So it's more a comment. I think it was very interesting to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
More questions? So I will thank you, and especially for letting us feel or touch these symbols. It was very educative, I must say. So
It's sometimes kind of also the first lesson this day to feel it, while also just not auditor, just listening to it. It's okay to feel it. So thank you.